The first time Ethan Cole realized his life had broken into pieces, it wasn't when his wife's car slid off a rain-soaked bridge, nor when the doctor placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and said words that would echo forever. It was a quiet morning years later, when his small son fell asleep at the kitchen table waiting for a father who was too tired to smile. Ethan stood there holding a cold cup of coffee, knowing that love alone was no longer enough to keep their fragile world standing. Before the story truly begins, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet miracles that change lives, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs hope today, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Ethan was a single father by circumstance, not choice. After losing his wife, the world narrowed into a routine of survival. He worked 2 jobs, one during the day at a packaging warehouse and another at night cleaning office buildings, while raising his son Noah with hands that were always tired and a heart that never stopped aching. Love, for Ethan, was responsibility. It was packing lunches at dawn, reading bedtime stories through exhaustion, and pretending strength when his son asked why his mother never came home. Ethan learned to swallow grief and move forward because stopping meant falling apart. The pressure became unbearable when Noah's medical bills grew. A minor heart condition required ongoing treatment, and insurance barely covered the costs. Debts piled up like silent threats. Ethan sold what little he owned, skipped meals, and still fell behind. That was when an offer came that felt less like help and more like a transaction dressed as mercy. Margaret Whitmore was a wealthy woman nearing the end of her life, burdened by guilt and desperate for peace. Her daughter, Amelia Whitmore, had been paralyzed from the waist down after a traumatic accident years earlier. The injury was complex, involving both physical damage and deep psychological trauma. Doctors said her condition was stable but unlikely to improve without intensive therapy that she had long given up on. Margaret's fear was not death, but leaving her daughter alone in a world that had already taken too much from her. Margaret proposed an arrangement that stunned Ethan. She would clear his debts, cover Noah's medical expenses, and secure his future, but only if Ethan married Amelia and promised to care for her after Margaret was gone. There was no romance in the offer, no illusion of love, only duty. Ethan felt trapped between pride and desperation. He hated the idea of marriage without love, hated even more the thought of being seen as a paid guardian. But when he looked at Noah sleeping under a flickering light bulb, the choice no longer belonged to him alone. The wedding was quiet, almost hollow. Amelia sat in her wheelchair, distant and expressionless, her eyes carrying a sorrow that felt heavier than anger. She had not chosen this either. To her, Ethan was another obligation forced upon her fragile life. They lived together like strangers sharing the same storm, bound by promises neither had made willingly. Amelia was intelligent, observant, and deeply wounded. She spent her days painting abstract canvases filled with dark colors and fractured shapes, reflections of a mind that had learned to protect itself through isolation. She had built walls not just around her heart, but around hope itself. Ethan respected her silence, focusing on routine and care, treating her with dignity but emotional distance. What changed everything were the small moments. Ethan began to speak to her while cooking, not expecting responses, just filling the quiet with warmth. He included her in Noah's life gently, letting her see bedtime stories, school drawings, and the innocent joy of a child who didn't know how broken the world could be. Amelia watched from the sidelines at first, but something in Noah's laughter began to soften her edges. Ethan never treated Amelia as fragile. He spoke to her as an equal, asked her opinions, valued her thoughts. When her hands trembled during moments of frustration, he stayed calm. When she withdrew into silence, he didn't push. Slowly, trust replaced tension. The house felt less like a contract and more like a home stitched together by shared survival. Amelia began therapy again, reluctantly at first. Not because she believed she would walk, but because she started to believe her life mattered to someone. Progress was slow, painful, and filled with setbacks. Some days she couldn't move at all. Other days, sensation flickered like a dying flame. Doctors explained that her condition was partly neurological and partly psychological, meaning fear and trauma had built invisible chains stronger than steel. Ethan was always there, not as a savior, but as a presence. He celebrated her smallest victories, a lifted toe, a steadier posture, a longer session without tears. He spoke of the future not as a dream, but as something worth attempting. The moment that would change everything came on an ordinary evening. Noah had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching one of Amelia's paintings that she had gifted him. Ethan noticed Amelia watching them, her eyes filled with something dangerously close to hope. Overwhelmed by emotion she didn't know how to name, Amelia broke down, convinced she would always be a burden, always be broken. Ethan moved closer, not to fix her, but to remind her she was not alone. He leaned down and kissed her, not out of obligation or pity, but from a place of deep, unspoken love that had grown quietly over time. It was a simple kiss, tender and sincere, but it carried everything they had never said. In that moment, something shifted inside Amelia. Not a miracle, not magic, but courage. Her body responded to a mind that finally believed it was safe to try. With trembling effort and Ethan's steady support, she pushed against the floor. Her legs shook violently, her breath caught, but she stood, only for a few seconds, before collapsing into his arms in disbelief and tears. Doctors later explained that the act itself was not healing, but symbolic. Her brain had released years of fear, allowing pathways long blocked by trauma to awaken. It would take months, maybe years, of therapy, but that moment proved something powerful. She could stand. She could try. Amelia's strength grew, so did their bond. Ethan was no longer fulfilling a contract, he was building a family. Amelia embraced Noah as her own, finding purpose in motherhood she never thought possible. Laughter returned to the house, replacing silence. Love, once forced, became freely given. Before this story ends, please pause for a moment and comment below what part of this journey touched you the most, because your words may give someone else the courage to keep going. Near the end of this journey, if this story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of love, or made you believe in second chances, please like, share, and comment on this video. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who need them the most. Years later, Amelia walked without assistance, not perfectly, not without scars, but proudly. Ethan watched her from the doorway, realizing that love had not healed her body alone, but it had healed their lives. What began as a forced promise became a bond stronger than fear, proving that sometimes, the most powerful miracles are born not from obligation, but from love that refuses to give up.